Good morning. Today we're going to be learning about Standard CE 6D, which is about the executive branch. So what are we doing today? We're going to learn about the executive branch, which is the president, and we're going to learn about what it takes to become a president. What happens if a president cannot finish his or her term in instances of like an impeachment or a death, and the responsibilities of the president. So we've been looking at the legislative branch, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate, and yesterday we learned about like bills becoming laws and how the president can veto those or pass them. So our current president is Mr. Donald Trump, and the Constitution set up rules for qualifications to become the president. Those include being a native-born U.S. citizen, being at least 35 years of age, and the candidate needs to have been a resident of the U.S. for 14 years. A presidency term lasts for 4 years, which is set up in the Constitution. How many terms a president can serve was actually not in the Constitution. George Washington had been selected to run for a third term, and he refused. So, out of respect to him, the later presidents only served for 2 terms. There's going to be like a little catch to that here in just a second. So how much does the president make? Well, the president makes $400,000. He or she is allowed an untaxed allowance of $50,000, and travel costs are reimbursed, and that varies. So back to the terms of a president. The 2-term tradition was broken by Franklin D. Roosevelt. He actually served 4 terms as president, and that is Mr. Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 2016, Hillary Clinton became the first woman to run for presidency on a major ticket. Hillary actually won the popular vote, but she lost the electoral vote. And in 2008, Barack Obama became the first African American president in the United States. And in 2020, we will be having our next presidential election. And if you want to pause the video and click on the link, that would be great. And you can meet our 2020 candidates for the Democrats and the Republicans. So the vice president, he's also included, or she is included in the executive branch. Our current VP, which is vice president, is Mike Pence. So responsibilities of the vice president, he or she serves as president if the president dies in office, leaves office, or is unable to fulfill his or her duties. Vice presidents serve a 4-year term, and they have the same constitutional qualifications as the president. How much does a vice president make? The vice president has a salary of $230,700, taxable expense allowance of $10,000. Don't know why there's an F there. So you have one job. The vice president has only one job in the Constitution. That is to preside over the Senate. They can't act in it, but the vice president can be a tiebreaker if there's a vote in the Senate that needs that. The vice president has been given more responsibilities in the past years. Vice presidents are sent to represent the United States overseas, and they work closely with the president to be fully informed of issues. Rules of succession. So if something happens to the president, these are the things that are going to happen following that. So if the president dies or resigns or there's an impeachment, the 25th Amendment to the Constitution allows the new president to nominate the new vice president. So the vice president would move up and he or she would nominate the new vice president. But for the checks and balances, the nomination must be checked by the House of it must be checked by the checks and balance system, and it must be approved by a majority vote in both houses of Congress. So presidents who died in office, there are 8, and Henry Harrison was the first one, Zachary Taylor, Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, Warren Harding, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. Presidential succession order. So if something happens to the president and he or she, kicks the bucket or is impeached or resigns, the vice president becomes the president. So what happens if the vice president, who's now the president, kicks the bucket? Well, if both the president and the vice president die or leave office, the 20th Amendment gives Congress the power to set the order of presidential succession. So the next person in line is the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives is the first in line. Next, the Senate. If the Speaker of the House leaves, then the President pro tempore of the Senate, and lastly, the members of the President's cabinet in the order of how the department was created. So I ran out of space, but that's like 4 and 5 together. You're going to have an activity, and this Google slide will be in your Google Classroom, and you'll be able to interact with it more and not just on a video, but you will click the quick reference, and this site tells you about the different presidents that died during their term in office, and your assignment is to pick one of those presidents, so one of those 8 presidents that we just talked about, and I want you to write a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the president, what happened, and who succeeded him. And you may use other resources to help you with this, but anything containing wiki, Wikipedia, wiki, whatever, is off limits. You can't use it. So sorry. All right, moving on to the roles and powers of the president. So the president plays a key role in policy making. The presidential power has grown in the years since the Constitution was ratified, but there are limits on what the president can and can't do. So ways the executive branch influences policy making. So they deliver an annual speech to Congress. This is called the State of the Union Address. In the video or in the Google Slides, there is the link for you to be able to watch a little mini version of the State of the Union Address. Okay. It is usually presented in late January, but this past year it was postponed due to the government shutdown. So it was in February. The speech details the programs and policy that the president wants Congress to put into effect. It also proposes the budget, and legislation is discussed. So the actual State of the Union address was over 3 hours long, but again, this is like a little mini clip, and I do want you guys to go back and watch that. There is a link. It's about vetoes, so what the president, whenever he or she, well, at this time, he has vetoed or denied. It's a pretty cool resource. It shows all the presidents and the bills that they rejected and the actions that Congress actually took following their veto. All right, ways the executive branch influences policy making. So the executive branch, he's the legislative leader. So he's proposing legislation, bills that he thinks or she thinks should be passed in the Senate to then come on to his office to be approved. And then he or she, well, he at this point, the president, approves or vetoes legislation. And again, a veto is whenever something is rejected or denied. So if the president vetoes a bill, it means that he or she is rejecting it, which could prevent it from becoming a law. If the president threatens a veto, Congress takes it pretty seriously, and they will often be discouraged to pass it. And if they are adamant about it and it's vetoed, it does take 2/3 vote from both houses to override a veto or pass it once the president has vetoed it. So ways the executive branch influences policy making. They appoint officials who help carry out the laws, issue executive acts and orders, appealing directly through the media and communications with citizens. Donald Trump is very active on Twitter. And cabinet departments and agencies and regulatory groups execute the laws. So the president exercises powers as the following, and I'm going to go into more depth on these. So the chief of state, the chief executive, chief legislator, chief diplomat, chief of party, and chief citizen. So, chief of state. This is a ceremonial head of the government. That means that the president is the head of the nation. He or she represents the people, and in the United States, the president rules over the people. Now, that's not the case for every country. A lot of places, the chief of state reigns over the government, but is not in active ruling. This happens in countries like England, Denmark, Japan, Italy, and Germany. The chief executive, which is the head of the executive branch of government, so the president makes sure that all laws are created by Congress are followed, and the president's cabinet members help with day-to-day administration of the federal government. And I have a picture here of Trump with his cabinet members. The president is also the chief legislator, and they are in charge of the legislative agenda. So the president helps shape public policies by working with Congress to help change bills into laws. The president is also the commander-in-chief, which is the head of the nation's armed forces. All military officers during war or times of peace answer to the president. The president has close relations to the military leaders and has the final say in planning how a war will be fought. This does still have to go through the checks and balances. The Constitution limits the president here because Congress actually declares war. So the legislative branch is who declares war, not the president. However, the president can send forces to any part of the world where U.S. interests are threatened. The president serves as the chief diplomat, so an American foreign policy leader. Foreign policy is the government's plan for interacting with all the other countries around the world. The U.S.'s actions impact other countries and vice versa. And the president appoints diplomats to represent the U.S. government in other countries. So with foreign affairs, the president meets with representatives from other countries in neutral locations. Diplomacy, the ability to interact with foreign governments. And these visits help build international friendships, and it helps build security. Treaties can fall under this, and they are written agreements between the countries. Treaties must be created with help from the Senate, and the Senate also approves them. The president is the chief of the party. He is the leader of the political party that controls the executive branch. The leader of the political party is what he or she is representing. Chief citizen. So the president is a representative of all of the people. The president represents all the citizens of the United States. The president is expected to work for the people and provide moral leadership. I have pictures of various presidents at their inaugurations. We have Mr. Obama, Mr. Trump, Mr. Clinton, and Mr. Bush. That is everything for this presentation. If you've missed anything, go back into Google Classroom. There were the assignments and the few little things I wanted you to look at in the Google Classroom, like in the Google presentation, not the video. So you will need to go back and finish those activities. Please raise your hand and let me know whenever you are finished with your notes, and I will come by and do a notebook check on standards 6C and 6D today. Thank you guys.